A recent video essay I saw, I won't say by who to give the benefit of privacy, stated that the sequel trilogy had the worst lightsaber fights out of all Star Wars films. Not only do I feel like this is grossly misinformed, but also just flat out false. You see, the point I would like to get across is that each trilogy in the Skywalker saga appears to model its sword choreography over very separate fighting styles. The lightsaber fight is a staple in every Star Wars film, but each series went about tackling it in a very different way. Allow me to elaborate. In the original trilogy, the idea of the lightsaber battle was a new concept, and thus people didn't know how to go about shooting it. However, much of the inspiration for A New Hope was based off the many popular samurai films of previous years. Thus, through this lens, we can start to understand the fights as a somewhat more futuristic take on the classic samurai katana duel. Every classic samurai film has a duel, but unlike American sword fights, the katana duel is more akin to a high noon standoff. It is not about how flashy or fast you make your strikes, but how quick and precise you can make one cut that ends your opponent. It is less about clashing blades and more of a chess game. This is certainly the idea behind the New Hope fight anyway. Later fights in the original trilogy increased in speed and choreography and began to take on more of a swashbuckling atmosphere, but there's always somewhat of a samurai katana atmosphere, it seems. Looking back at the more modern films first and then coming back to the original trilogy can seem jarring, in terms of both special effects and technique, but you have to understand the mindset at the time. The prequel trilogy, however, decided to really ramp things up. George Lucas wanted to convey the Jedi in their prime by having the fights be faster and more elaborate. This led to the fast-paced and highly choreographed duels of the prequel era. Gone was the methodical standoff, as it was replaced by pure, fast-paced action in the form of fencing-esque duels, such as in the film The Count of Monte Cristo. Also weaved into the choreography was what some people refer to as arrow flinning, which is a reference to the over-the-top twirling or showboating of some blade strokes. This was mostly meant to overwhelm or confuse the opponent, but it got its name from the classic Errol Flynn sword movies of old, such as Captain Blood.
I've watched all these swashbuckling films all my life. You know, I was a huge Errol Flynn fan when I was a kid, and this seems to be the next step in the fencing age.
Many sword experts criticized this approach to fighting as a waste of energy and claimed it was not efficient. Thus, when it was time for the sequel trilogy to come around, a smart compromise had to be made. When it came to the classic lightsaber duel, the sequel trilogy had to take a different approach. With the vast amount of complaints that the prequels received for its Errol Flynn-style duels, with many claiming that the choreography was hokey or something along those lines, the new trilogy under the reins of Disney decided to put a foot in each realm. One part stylized and one part grounded, the fights were believable, yet still fast-paced. The lightsaber fights were now more in the vein of a medieval showdown. Swap out the lightsabers for swords from something like Lord of the Rings, and you get the picture. Kylo Ren's lightsaber even has a crossguard. If that doesn't clue you in, I don't know what will. The last thing I want to talk about is the narrative concept of the lightsaber fight itself. That same video essay mentioned from the beginning claimed that a person should not be able to pick up a lightsaber and start fighting perfectly. That's what Jedi training is for. I counter this with it is absolutely possible. Jedi are psychic space samurai. There's a degree of telepathy in everything they do. Luke had zero lightsaber training, yet still held his own against Vader in Cloud City. It's all about instinct and the ability to read the Force and predict attacks. That also explains the high level of choreography. It's the only way to get an attack in when your opponent can sense your every move. Thus, with this in mind, Rey could absolutely hold her own on Starkiller Base. She is one of the strongest Force users to exist in literally hundreds of years, thus her level of instinct was probably extremely high. Even Finn, who is slightly Force sensitive, held his own for a little while. So in the end, please stop saying the sequel trilogy doesn't make sense with its lightsaber fights. They make perfect sense. Thank you for your time.